some things in the last 30 minutes or so, I think there's a chance the NBA they're done. I think they may just walk away from the bubble and say we're pulling the plug on this playoff thing. They seem to be pretty shaken by all of this, and it started. I remember yesterday seeing Doc Rivers' comments after his post-game speech, and we got fires going all over, literally in California. We have fires going all over this country right now, and the sports world is right in the midst of all of it.
Yeah, I mean, this just keeps coming. I mean, I put out a tweet, and it's just like an hour ago. It's just the hits just keep coming. You know, I've got friends that are out in California right now, and kind of dealing with the fire situation, monitoring if they're going to have to leave their homes. It's just wrecking houses up there, and of course wildlife. I had a good buddy of mine who actually lives in Australia, who they just got done fighting fires, and just out of control, the amount of wildlife and habitats that were destroyed by those fires in Australia. Now, you've got lightning storms causing fires in California, and it's just wrecking homes, lives. There are people dying. One of my best friends is living just outside of Little Rock in Arkansas. They've already been talking to him today. They've got preparations for how they're going to deal with this hurricane. And then the social injustice issues continuing to pop up. And you mentioned the NBA in real jeopardy of not finishing their season. And I think the thing that gives that legs, Greg, is you've got advocates speaking on every team now. It's not just Milwaukee who organized the boycott today. There are people and players on every organization, on every team that are stepping forward with this. So I'm with you. I think it is more than a possibility that the NBA is finished, and we've already seen it carry over into baseball too, with the Milwaukee Brewers postponing their game today with the Cincinnati Reds. So the social injustice issues are now, I don't want to say are now, they have been. There have been athletes speaking up and trying to make differences on this, but now it has affected scheduled contests and the actual leagues themselves. So, yeah, we live in quite the world right now. Trying to comprehend everything that's happened in the year 2020 has been mind-warping, to say the least, and I don't know where it goes from here. This is a very serious thing, and I don't ever want to bring politics into this show, but you wonder how much of this is headed toward the November election and what's going to happen. And I don't know how much sports is going to be affected until that election in November, but it's clear that election has had an impact and will have an impact on how people perceive sports with these with the protests of the social injustices and everything else. So this has been a year from hell in a lot of areas, and it's hard for me to say that because my daughter was born this year. The Chiefs won a Super Bowl this year, but there hasn't been much that's gone right in our society or in our world that we live in since the turn of the year.
Back to the NBA, they're all in this bubble, so they're all down there in the same community, all of them, the teams they have been for a month or so. In fact, I believe there's a meeting coming up down there that every player that's still there is invited to go to it to air and kind of formulate a game plan and to talk about, we may know before we're off the air tonight. I mean, there could be some kind of announcement that this thing's over before we get done at 9 o'clock tonight. So they're going to have a get-together. So all of these NBA superstars are going to walk into the same conference room or ballroom down there in the Disney campus to talk about all of these things. And I mean, they have been out in front on this whole thing from the get-go, from the shooting and death up in Minneapolis back in May. Heck, if you flipped on it, if you've watched any NBA the last couple of weeks, the Black Lives Matter logo is all over the place. Every team is wearing the T-shirts. I mean, it is integrated into the NBA more than any other league that's going right now. And primarily it's a league made up of African-American players. I mean, they have by far the most percentage of players that are playing in the National Basketball Association right now. And so, and LeBron James is kind of the leader of that group, and he has been very, very vocal about all of this. Agree or disagree with him, he has been extremely vocal about it. In fact, he tweeted, I can't repeat it, what he tweeted this afternoon, because I'd get us fined if I tweeted what he said this afternoon about this whole thing. And this revolves around the shooting the other night of Jacob Blake up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, again, a community between Chicago and Milwaukee. The gentleman is in the hospital, maybe paralyzed, is what I heard from the shooting that he suffered the other night. I don't know all the details of that. I think there's a little bit more gray area in this one than some of the previous things that have gone on, so I'm going to reserve judgment until I hear all the facts, and all the facts aren't out there yet. And so for me to jump in and say I know exactly what happened, I don't. And I don't think those players in Orlando know either, nor do I think they care, really, what some of the facts are, to be quite honest with you. I think they see this as just another injustice toward a black individual. And yet here in Lincoln, Nebraska today, we have a policeman who is fighting for his life in a Lincoln hospital today because he went to serve a warrant and got blasted in the chest with a shotgun. I mean, it's not easy being a police officer, and there's a guy that's on his deathbed in Lincoln right now, so that you mix into the soup and stir it up as well. Are there bad cops? Absolutely, there are bad cops. There are also good cops that are out there doing the job, protecting everybody, and I don't want that to get lost in this whole discussion either, that currently here in Lincoln, Nebraska, we got a cop fighting for his life right now after getting drilled in the chest today doing his job. So it's just all out there right now. It's explosive, and you're right, politics has done this since the beginning of time. It bleeds itself into everything else. This is not the first election that a lot of this gets brought up. I mean, a lot of people can think back to 1968 when there were all kinds of race riots going on around the country that led into an election that year as well. So it's certainly nothing new. We've dealt with this before, and we seem to be dealing with it about every 4 years in this country. So it kind of throws you around. We felt like we're kind of getting back to something with playoffs going on and in a couple of the pro leagues, Major League Baseball up and going, and now this is canceled today. And again, right now, if I had to bet, I would say the NBA is going to pull the plug and they're going to be done for several months. So we'll see. Maybe they'll come out of this meeting tonight and come up with a different strategy to move forward. All right, if you have some thoughts about that, certainly can air your thoughts about it at 531-500-4686, 531-500-4686. Or you can shoot us a text at that very same number. That is our U.S. Cellular text line. U.S. Cellular, the official wireless provider of Husker Athletics. All right, back to the Big Ten football news of the day. The Blue White Illustrated, which is the rival site for Penn State, put up a piece earlier today, and they act like there's a lot more things that have taken shape with the plan for the winter season for football than what Bill Moose indicated to us here last night. Again, I'm reading from Blue White Illustrated. It's Penn State's rival site. Now more than 2 weeks after the conference postponed all of its fall sports, pushing football competition back until at least the spring, a preliminary structure has been outlined for an abbreviated Big Ten schedule. Here's how it would work. A preset 8-game schedule beginning the week after New Year's Day, likely kicking off on Wednesday or Thursday and progressing through the weekend. Again, I'm quoting from this story. The goal will be not to have games overlap with each other, opening up multiple television windows to various broadcast partners. Every team would get one bye week. No games would be held on campuses, instead moving to the neutral site, the domes that we've talked about in Minneapolis, Detroit, and Indianapolis. Then a conference championship game would be held between the winner of the East against the winner of the West at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena on the second weekend of March. Additionally, sources indicate that there is also a possibility with the occurrence of a similar spring season for the Pac-12, and that the two conferences might pit their champions against each other in the Rose Bowl. This is based on Sandy Barber, who's the Penn State AD, comments made on Monday indicating that some of the broad concepts behind its spring schedule could be unveiled by the Big Ten in the next week or so. A more formal announcement could be in the works in the near future from the conference. How much stock, Ben, do you put into this report? We've heard some of these things. Again, it kind of goes against Bill Moose didn't tip his hand at this at all when we had him on last night.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess is the simple answer. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what side of the story to hear. I don't know what report is accurate. Obviously, this seems to be a reputable source, being a rival site. However, we've heard all kinds of different reports. We couldn't even get the fact if there was a president vote straight, and I think that line is still blurry of what is said and what is done and what isn't. So, yeah, I mean, I'll entertain every idea that I hear. I'll look at it. I'll read it. I'll make sure I'm familiar with it. But unless it's actually announced by somebody, I don't know that I can ingest that information without a grain of salt. So I'm going to just take it for what it's worth as a report right now and just wait until something is announced, because there are a lot of things that could hypothetically happen. There are a lot of ways that this could happen. I think some of that makes sense, some of that doesn't. But again, early report coming out today on that, and I think that's just what I'm most ready for now, is to just get some type of clarity of what this is going to look like. And in all honesty, Greg, I'm getting more and more frustrated by the day with the Big Ten, knowing that the increase in testing could happen. It sounds like it's going to happen with tests coming back in as quick as 15 minutes. I do think that my worries that these other leagues are going to play gets less and less with every passing day, and that to me adds the frustration to the Big Ten. Instead of letting things play out and letting things develop and letting teams prepare, they ain't the cord out of the wall, and now they're having to scramble and put a plan together for what a season's going to look like when other conferences are talking about their week ones. And by this time next week on our show, we would be breaking down what the Purdue Boilermakers look like. Instead, we're hypothesizing on what a Big Ten season may look like.
I think it's fair to say that in Penn State's mind, this has real legs, because this is the second time this very plan has come out of the Penn State camp. James Franklin alluded to it a week ago when he had a press conference, and now you have their AD giving credence to this report. So this is obviously this is a push coming from Penn State. Ryan Day also indicated he would prefer more of a winter season than a spring season to go forward with this. This plan, to me, makes some sense from the standpoint that everybody would be done except the two divisional winners by the first weekend of March, which then might save the 2021 season, which I think that's got to really – and I asked Bill Moose that last night. I said, how much of whatever you put together in the winter or the spring do you keep in your back of your mind that we don't want to touch 2021 at all? You want to be able to have the 7 home games and kick it off when it's supposed to begin. And he said, we have to keep that going. We also have to make sure we give these athletes plenty of time to recover from a season where if they need off-season surgery on a knee or a shoulder or an ankle, whatever it may be, that you give them time to have that procedure done and get themselves healthy and ready for the fall. So that popped out earlier today. Again, plans are like momentum, and this one to me has some momentum behind it. Again, I think it's fair to also question and say, okay, if it's okay to play January 5th or 7th or whatever, why was it then not okay to play sometime in November with games? And that's a very fair argument to say as well. All right, here's what we have coming up on the program tonight. We're going to have our Husker Huddle with Jeremiah Searles, one of the all-time popular Huskers. Jordan Westerkamp going to sit down with Jeremiah. We'll have that conversation coming up here in a couple of minutes. Hour number 2, Kevin Suits, the sports director from 1011, is going to be on board with us. They are back busy again, covering high school sports. We'll get his thoughts about being out and watching softball that's being played right now, some golf, and at least one football game happened last Friday, a whole batch of them coming your way this Friday. Hour number 3, we'll have buy-sell coming your way. And we'll also hear from Jeff Culhane, the voice of the North Dakota State Bison. They added a football game earlier this week. They're going to play one fall football game against Central Arkansas in early October and then play their conference in the spring. Pretty interesting. Nobody else has come up with something like that. North Dakota State has. We'll get Jeff's take on how that came about coming up in hour number 3. All that and a whole lot more to cover here tonight, including Thomas Fedoni, who's going to make an announcement of where he's going to go to college. The outstanding tight end from Council Bluffs going to make that announcement during our third hour of Sports Alley here tonight. We'll have the latest on that. When we come back, it's our Husker Huddle with Jeremiah Searles and Jordan Westerkamp. That's straight ahead.
Welcome back to another edition of Husker Huddle. I'm your host, Jeremiah Searles, here on the Husker Sports Network. Today we are joined by Husker legend, wide receiver Jordan Westerkamp. Jordan, how are you, my friend?
Doing great. I wouldn't say legend, but I appreciate it, Searles.
Okay, well, you are a legend, especially in my book, Jordan, because you and I have been close to death together. Not many people know the full story, but Hail Mary catch, cool, everything was awesome. You and I were on the bottom of that dog pile, and I literally thought I was going to die.
Yeah, you saved my life. You saved my life.
I remember I'm laying on top of Westy because I was the first one to get down there after Sam Birch just absolutely face masked him to the ground. And I'm laying, and then all of a sudden the weight of the world comes, and I just keep hearing Westy yell at me, get off, get off, get off. And I'm like, dude, there's nothing I can do. Well, Jordan, let's catch up a little bit. It's been a while since here in Husker Land. I've got a chance to kind of catch up with you. What have you been up to nowadays?
Hey, man, just staying safe, like everyone else, right? Following all the health protocols, doing what I can to, just stay healthy. It's been a bummer, obviously, for everybody. Every industry's been taking a hit, so it's been a tough deal, but, just been remaining positive and just doing what I can do right now. Obviously, a lot of the sports industries had to shut down or get put on hold. I was in the XFL, and they had to suspend their league, unfortunately, but like I said, just staying positive, and every industry's been taking a hit. So I'm just looking forward and hoping to get back to normal here pretty soon.
Yeah, so what is the plan with the XFL? Are you going to try and work back to it if they can get the season rolling again?
Yeah, I'm keeping my eye on it. I just don't know when they're going to get that back to normal. I know The Rock and his other partner, they just bought the XFL. So that's cool. He's an awesome promoter, as we all know. He's just known celebrities out there. So it'll be interesting to see what he does and what his game plan is going forward. Like I said, I've been watching it, but there hasn't been much information said what they're going to be doing, if they're even going to have a season this spring. So just have to wait and see. But, yeah, keeping my eye on it.
So you've actually had a unique not many guys get a chance to play in training camp, the NFL. You got to play in Canada for a little bit, and the XFL. How are those three similar yet different all at the same time for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's all football. When you get down to it, it's all football. The CFL is a little bit different, just how the field's different. You're able to sprint up from 10 yards away to the line and get a head start as a receiver and just take off. There's a little bit of rule differences in there. It's 1 foot inbounds, and when you have to catch the ball with the CFL. But the XFL and the NFL are very similar. I know the XFL was experimenting with some different kickoffs and kickoff returns when it comes to safety, and that was kind of wild. Yeah, each league was very different in its own way, but very similar as well. Because it's just football at the end of the day.
I thought the XFL did a nice job in the regards of I think all the other smaller leagues that have tried to peel off. I mean, you had the UFL, the AFL, all that tried to mimic the NFL and kind of be the NFL's little brother too much. And I thought the XFL actually did a really nice job of being unique. I think that everyone watches the NFL to watch the Odell Beckhams, the Saquon Barkleys do the remarkable, right? I think the XFL was we're not going to have those guys because they're in the NFL. Let's do something different and put a still very quality thing on the field. And so I thought the XFL did a really nice job of blending the NFL, but also putting their own twist on it.
Yeah, definitely. It was very cool and very unique how they went about it. Their advertising was out of this world. It was a place. Vince McMahon did a fantastic job. It's just kind of sad to see it go. Said The Rock bought it back, so it'll be great to see where they go with it.
I mean, speaking of things going, man, news this past week, Big Ten football not happening. I know you're a Big Ten guy. I mean, you played here at Nebraska in the Big Ten. You're from Chicago, so I know you've grown up watching the Big Ten. What was last week like? I mean, I know I rode the emotions of eating my feelings to anger to all over the place. What was the emotions like for you there in the Westerkamp household when you read the news of no football this fall?
Yeah, we were disappointed. We understand the player safety. I mean, that always comes first, number one. But, we're a huge football family, and it's just selfish us. It's sad to not be able to see the season, and that's a bummer. But like I said, I know safety is number one priority, and I know there's a lot of smart people out there that know a lot more than I do about it. I have my opinions on it, but I'm not qualified, and I understand that. So I wish they were playing. I want them to play, but I totally understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, selfishly, I'm right there with you, Westy. I'm like, man, I really want them to play. But one thing, I had someone ask me this the other day, and I want to ask it back to you. So you're going into 2016, your senior year, right? You're going into 2016. It's August. You're gearing up for your senior year, and this happens to you. How do you view that as a player, or how do you even think you might respond to that? Because I can't imagine trying to be one of these kids in North Stadium right now, just sitting there going, "Man, now what?"
Right. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, this has never happened before, right? So it's tough. And I saw a quote today. I think it was from Nick Saban actually, and he was talking about how if there were any juniors or seniors, if they end up playing the season in the spring, and seniors could hypothetically stay and do that if they wanted to, I guess. I mean, again, I don't know how it works, but
Right.
he had a good quote saying, if there were anybody on the team, a junior, senior, who had a good draft stock grade, they would leave. They would easily leave. And this season would sort of turn into like a JV type season. So that was his quote today. So it's tough. I don't know what I would do in that situation. It's tough.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think there's probably, and you might agree with me on this, there's probably about 20 guys in college football that have first round that are legit, don't have to play this year, getting drafted in the first round. And those guys, if there's a spring season, 100% should sit out. The problem is there's probably going to be 100 guys that have 100 different people telling them you're a first-round pick, and they're going to sit out, and then that number's just going to spiral. And so I think it will spiral a little bit out of control, especially if the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 all play. And then these kids are going to feel like they're behind, they're not going. So it's a mess, man. I mean, my hope is that Nebraska can figure it out. I mean, again, there won't be any football until the spring, but even then, man, 2 full seasons. Could you imagine 2 full seasons on your body in 1 calendar year?
Yeah, I mean, that's just, it's crazy. The body can only take so much. So I don't know. Safety is the number one priority. I get that, but there's going to be a lot of things they have to figure out. And it's actually going to come back to player safety that they're going to have to figure out for the future seasons.
Absolutely. Well, before we dive into Husker football here, I know you're a big supporter of Team Jack as well as I am myself. I wanted to give a quick shout-out to Andy. I got the Twice the Fight shirt on here as we're talking, thinking about him. And just know that we love you guys, the Hoffman family, and that I send my best. And I know Westerkamp, and he sends his best to you guys as well.
Absolutely. Keep fighting that good fight. I got a whole box of those T-shirts downstairs. So we love you. Stay strong, man.
Absolutely, man. So let's move on to a little bit about our Huskers here. So season puts on hold, and I mean, I take a step back and I look at this Husker football team from afar. You start going, some more development and stuff might not be terrible for this Husker football team. What were your expectations going into this season, and kind of what do you think now, if any, may change with the spring season?
Yeah, just like you said, look at all the positives now. Look at a little bit more time.
Yep.
That's great. Hey, make it as positive as possible. So that's awesome. But I mean, they've got a lot of great players, and I know Frost, he's heading in the right direction. I know that it's not what they wanted the first couple seasons, but we all believe in him. We trust them. They've got some great players, some great new coaches too, with a lot of experience. So, like you said, take all this time in the world. Now, I don't even know what their protocol is going to be for the next couple of months.
I don't think they know.
So it's just be smart and take these next couple months and just do whatever you can to get your players better and in even better shape than they already are right now.
Right. I mean, so the big question on this football team right now, I mean, when you were here, Westy, you guys had an unbelievable, when I was here, had an unbelievable wide receiver room. It seemed like every year there's more and more standout stars. I mean, Kenny, yourself, Quincy, JD, Stanley, it goes down the list. And now it seems like this offense is just giant question mark at wide receiver. I mean, as you've watched Scott Frost's offense and you've seen what they do with the receivers, how big is that going to be this year of needing guys to step up, or what can you kind of look for from this wide receiver group?
Yeah, definitely. And as we know, losing JD was a big deal. He's a great player, great guy. I mean, I wish him all the best. I know they just got a grad transfer, Omar Manning.
Yep.
He's going to be a great player. Big-bodied guy. They've got Cade Warner. They've got Ondell Robinson, so they've got the players. They've got a ton of good players. It's just going to be very interesting to see how they do out there. And Adrian Martinez is a great quarterback. So I mean, they have the weapons. They just got to put it all together, and they'll be great. And I know the new OC Matt Lubick, I think that's his name. He's got a lot of experience at the receiver position. I think I read like 17 years of coaching at the receiver position. So he'll have those guys ready to rock. It'll be exciting once football comes back. Now the hype's going to be crazy with all this.
Oh my gosh! Can you imagine the first football game at Memorial Stadium in 2021 after a whole year of no football there? Man, this state is going to go insane.
I'm going to have to make sure I'm at that one.
Oh, you better believe I'll be front and center up in the skybox screaming off the roof like I always am. Well, Westerkamp, I wanted to, Westy, I don't know why I always call you Westy. Westy, I want to thank you for joining us here on Husker Huddle here at the Husker Sports Network, man. It's always great to catch up with you, always good insight. Excited to continue to follow you. Hope to see you back doing WWE moves with The Rock on the sideline there as the XFL starts rocking and rolling. And you got any last words for Husker Nation here?
Hey, just keep your heads up. Just keep your heads up, and it'll all go back to normal pretty soon. Football ain't going away. It'll be back. If that's next year, whatever that is, it'll be back. So just stay positive and keep that hype going.
Oh, yeah, I got to keep the hype up. Thank you guys for joining us again on this week's edition of Husker Huddle. We'll see you next week.
Great stuff. Man, I miss Jordan Westerkamp. Good work there by Jeremiah Searles. Jordan joined us on our Sports Nightly Hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. 531-500-4686. That's the number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question or shoot us a text on that very same number. Thanks again to Jeremiah Searles was sitting down with Jordan Westerkamp, and I made the comment, Ben, after the piece ran. I miss Jordan. What a fun guy to cover. What a great guy to watch. I mean, some of the catches he made, the one behind the back, obviously the Hail Mary is in the front and center of everybody's mind, but man, was he a tough guy, and he found a way to get open all the time.
Yeah, that's something that we've really missed the last couple of seasons. You know, Stanley had that gene to him too, but when you needed a big play, you knew you could count on Westy to be open and to catch the ball. And we just haven't had, especially last year, I guess is where I'm going with this. We didn't have that playmaker out there that was just reliable at all times. And you know, you'd look out there and you would want a guy like Stan or you'd want a guy like Westy out there, and unfortunately we just didn't have that guy. And I've been watching a lot of. I mean, I already went back and rewatched all 12 Husker games from last year, not that long ago, but I'm starting to do it all over again just for background noise. And you know, looking out at that field when I watched the Ohio State game today, and you know, there just wasn't any options. You know, you've got Mike Williams lining up on the outside, you've got J.D. Spielman who's been blanketed, and that game in particular wouldn't have mattered. Justin Fields was perfect that night. My point is, when you don't have anybody on the outside that can win consistently, what happens is the rest of the offense collapses, and we saw that a lot last year. So if you need guys like Westerkamp, you need guys like Stan, and you're right. Jordan was one of the most consistent dudes on the field, off the field, with the media that you'll find, and tough too. I mean, man, that was one dude that was not afraid to. And JD was that way too. He played pretty fearless, you know, not afraid to go over the middle and just take shot after shot after shot and find a way to stay in a game. So, yeah, he's one that we knew we would miss for a long time, and I mean, that was very true. We do miss him.
You mentioned JD. He got news today, Ben. He has been granted immediate eligibility at TCU, so he will be lining up for the Horned Frogs this year. Are you surprised, and do you agree with it? It's the decision by the NCAA?
Not surprised. You know, anytime, you know, mental health was something that JD was fighting, and he was very open about that. And any time that that part is submitted into a waiver, I don't know that there's a committee out there that would say we're not going to let this pass. I mean, especially if this new place is better for his mental health and his well-being. I think, you know, 11 times out of 10, that type of waiver is going to get accepted. So, no, I'm not overly shocked by the ruling today.
Yep. The Horned Frogs will line it up their first game on September the 12th. There was a change in the ACC. Virginia Tech and North Carolina State were supposed to open the season against each other on the 12th. NC State's had an outbreak on their team, and so they requested of the ACC could they move to their open date on the 26th. They've been granted that, so they'll back up a couple of weeks to begin their season again. I think these teams, if they are to make it through their season, they're going to have these peaks and valleys like we've seen in baseball, where you're going to have some games canceled, postponed, moved. And there's one already for the ACC that happened here today. Got a question on our text line. Would an early enrollee into January be eligible to play if we have that winter-spring season? I don't know that we have an answer to that yet, do we?
I haven't heard. No, I've just heard of current members on the roster won't lose a year of eligibility. If they kind of fall into that category, if they're currently enrolled and on the team, I think they probably could play and not have it count against their eligibility. I guess it depends how far you want to stretch that rule. There wasn't really a ton of follow-up, to that. But I know James Franklin, we're talking about Penn State in the first segment, that was a conversation piece that he brought up of a concern was what's going to happen with, early enrollees, because we know that became a rare turn from a rarity to now you've got 3 or 4 every class that are coming to school early.
Yeah, at least. Some have been a little bit more than that. I don't know how much. Well, you talk about you can't get there until after Christmas. I don't. And if this first week of January ends up happening, the team's going to start practice in December. So I don't know how you could get there and get up and ready to go. I mean, you might be allowed to play, but I just don't know if you could get yourself ready to go by then.
There wouldn't be many that are physically or mentally ready to go on the field. I know that a lot of times they get the playbook beforehand, but yeah, to not work with any of the schemes or the systems or even set foot on a campus, it would take a special kind of player to be out there, or a lot of coronavirus cases for that to have to happen.
Yeah, just, boy, the learning curve. You'd be showing up and the team would be into game week prep when you got there for your first practice session. I think that would be really, really difficult to contribute. Maybe somebody could help you out, but I think that might be a long shot. We'll check into that more. I think we'll hear more about those type of things in the coming weeks. 531-500-4686. That's the number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question. We're back with more Sports Nightly next. Our Sports Nightly hotline brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. Greg Sharp, Ben McLaughlin with you on a Wednesday night. Sports Nightly here on the Husker Sports Network. 531-500-4686 is the number. Let's head to the phones. Stay in Lincoln and John. Good evening, John.
Yes, I was listening to a national sports show this morning, and they were talking to the coach of University of Southern Cal, and he was mentioning that their decision was based upon medical qualifications, and that they were in contact with the people that were making those decisions, for them, which and they said they had a sound basis of why they weren't going to have the season. But then they went in talking about next season and about the athletes, and he named several of them, and I'm not going to mention their name on the radio, how they are unionizing and pushing for a 51% payout to all the athletes through the schools in the Big 12. And I just wondered what you thought of that. And then the other thing I was thinking about was our walk-on program is so important. And the major benefit or only benefit the walk-ons get is the training table, which is no longer there at that time. And I know that a lot of the other schools we're competing against recruiting still have their training table. I know that Iowa has a workout training table in between reps when they're in their weight rooms. And then the other question is, if you go to a restaurant or some business and they cut back their staff, the quality of the service is not going to be as good. And I wondered how cutting back, furloughing, and cutting the 10% salary is going to affect the quality of the Nebraska athletic department.
Yeah, a lot there. What was his first point?
The Pac-12 demands for 51% revenue share.
Oh, that came out a while ago. And I'm guessing he's talking about the statement that the athletes put out way back when. It was probably close to a month ago at this point, right? Yeah. Don't see that happening. I think there are some points in there that are valid. I also think there are some points in there that are pretty outlandish that I don't think will ever happen in college sports. That payout that you're speaking of, I think being one of them, that will never happen. In regards to the training table, I would disagree with your comment that the only benefit walk-ons get is the training table, access to the training table. A lot of the walk-ons just want the opportunity to put a helmet on at University of Nebraska, and we've seen walk-ons earn scholarships. We've seen walk-ons make careers in the NFL. Is that a high percentage? No, but that's the walk-on dream, if you will. That's the selling point. That's why a lot of those kids turn down scholarships elsewhere to go play for Nebraska, or the chance to play for Nebraska. Will that hurt the numbers? I don't think so. And the last point was about staffing. I mean, there's no doubt there's a lot of slack that's going to be, have to be picked up over at the athletic department with furloughing 51 people. So yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know the intricacies of that day to day and how that will be affected, but I'm sure losing 51 employees for a few months is definitely going to be a hindrance in that regard.
John, I hope you heard our chat last night with Bill Moose. We covered a lot of this with Bill Moose last night, so maybe you missed it, but we went over that. And you brought up Iowa. There's no doubt Iowa and Nebraska have taken different paths with what they're trying to do to make up for the lost money. Iowa dropped 4 sports. They dropped men's and women's swimming. They dropped men's tennis. They dropped men's gymnastics. So they dropped sports. So they cut out of their budget a lot of opportunities for student athletes. Nebraska chose not to go down that path. They chose to reduce staff. They chose to, as you said, shut down the training table. There's more ways to skin a cat, and Iowa chose to cut sports. Nebraska chose to cut people. And, yeah, it's not ideal. It's not what they want to do. I don't think they're ignoring the student athletes at all. I think ignoring the student athletes would be doing what Iowa did, and that's slashing sports out of your budget. None of this is easy. None of this is what anybody wants to do. Gary Barta at Iowa didn't want to do this. Bill Moose at Nebraska didn't want to do this. So everybody took different paths. Iowa's even taking out financial loans from banks. Nebraska's not having to do that. So as we see what different schools do, I think you can compare all that up. But yeah, it's a shame the training table stopped. A lot of people lost their jobs that work on that training table every day. None of this feels good, and it's not going to feel good for some time coming.
I'm Josh Hilkeman. We start with news out of the NBA playoffs, where all 3 playoff games were postponed today after the Milwaukee Bucks boycotted their scheduled contest against the Orlando Magic in the aftermath of the Jacob Blake shooting in Kenosha, Wisconsin earlier this week. Bucks players said in a statement that they are, quote, tired of the killings and injustice. After Milwaukee didn't take the floor against Orlando, the NBA made the decision to postpone the other Game 5s between the Rockets and Thunder and Lakers and Trailblazers. The Milwaukee Brewers also followed suit, postponing their game in Major League Baseball against the Cincinnati Reds. The Mariners have also postponed their game tonight. Major League Baseball action earlier today in Game 1 of a doubleheader. The Braves down the Yankees 5-1 in 7 innings. And New York and Atlanta playing Game 2 right now. No score in the top of the 4th inning. Cubs and Tigers scoreless in the top of the 3rd. The Twins lead the Indians 2-0 in the top of the 3rd inning. Just about ready for first pitch in St. Louis between the Cardinals and the Royals. And at 8:45 tonight, the Giants are hosting the Dodgers. In the NHL playoffs, Eastern Conference second round action earlier today, Game 2 between the Flyers and the Islanders. Philadelphia won at 4-3 in overtime, tying that series at a game apiece. And they're just about ready to drop the puck between the Bruins and the Lightning, Game 3 of that series, as that one's tied at a game apiece. And the Western Conference second round, it's the Avalanche and the Stars. That one will start at 9:30. Dallas leads the series 2-0. Live inside the Husker Sports Network studios, I'm Josh Hilkeman.
Your state, your team, your show. This is Sports Nightly.
Lejean in at quarterback for Maryland. Looking at 3rd and 9 now at the 30-yard line. Lejean gets the snap. Gets hit, dropped. Oh, what a sack. Big-time hit by JoJo Doman back at the 21-yard line. Doman's second sack of the year.
Now, let's check the pulse of Husker Nation with your hosts, Greg Sharp and Ben McLaughlin.
We're back, hour number 2, Sports Nightly here on a Wednesday night, our hump day edition of Sports Nightly. Hope you had a good day today. Man, just craziness out there continues for 2020 with the NBA postponing all 3 of their playoff games today, and some Major League Baseball games also being called off because of the protests for the shooting of Jacob Blake up in Wisconsin earlier in the week. We're going to talk some high school sports here in a minute with Kevin Suits, the sports director at 1011, and our old buddy Jeff Colhane's going to join us later on in the hour. the North Dakota State Bison have added a football game. They're going to play one football game this fall. They're going to play Central Arkansas the first Saturday of October. We'll see how that came about and how that's playing up in Fargo. So we're looking forward to talking to Jeff later on. But right now, glad to welcome on board Kevin Suits, who has got to be a happy guy right now because you actually have high school sports going on. I mean, man, a sports staff with actual sports to cover. Who would have thunk that, huh, Kevin?
It's a beautiful thing, isn't it, Greg? The past few weeks have been really nice being out on the football field and talking to some of these local coaches and players and gearing up for week number one. Games start, well, they started last week, but the first official week with everybody jumping in really takes effect tomorrow.
Yeah, last week Seacrest had a game. North Star played Hastings in one of the 4 games that took place around the state on a Friday night. You weren't at that one. You were at a different one. What was it like to be at an actual high school football game again? Did it get to you at all?
Yeah, I got a little tear in the eye, I think, when I walked up. Yeah. It was amazing just getting there. I went up to Schuyler. And, that's a program that hasn't had the most success, but its coach is Jason Ankra, who played for Nebraska a few years ago. And, man, he's a great coach. I'll tell you that right now. He knows what he's doing. But just the overall atmosphere, they had cheerleaders right off the field. They were wearing masks but still doing their cheers. There were fans in the opposing sidelines or in the stands. There were fans in the home stands. And in Schuyler, it's a rural community, so there were some restrictions in place, but it wasn't as stringent as it is here in Lincoln at this point in time, especially in my conversation with Dan Corey, my colleague who was over at the game at Seacrest. My experience was a little bit different because the limitations on the crowd were not as strict. There were a lot of community members that just rolled up, and some were standing about 10, 15 feet off the field of play watching some football, and it was a beautiful night last Friday, too.
Well, that's great. Well, not only do you have football, you have softball taking place, golf's underway, a lot of the different sports. Volleyball's getting cranked up as well at the high school level. As you've talked to these coaches, how big of an obstacle has it been to deal with practicing with the virus, with monitoring their players? How big of an adjustment has it been for them?
It's been an adjustment. I've heard one coach specifically say, even just this past week, he goes, everybody needs to have their mask on. And there were about 4 kids on a knee in a huddle. They didn't have their masks. And this was mid-practice. He just wanted to address them as a group as they were transitioning from one drill to the next. And he kicked all 4 of them out of the huddle immediately. He goes, so-and-so, where's your mask? Get out of here. So-and-so, where's your mask? Get out. When everybody got back in the huddle, he said, guys, I know it's annoying. I don't like wearing it either, but it's something we have to do. We're trying to be responsible. And Lincoln Christian here in town, this is a team with smaller numbers, but they're in Lincoln and they're playing by all the rules. They even have instituted what they call a COVID break. And Kurt Earl, the head coach there, he can give you some scientific data behind it, but it's all about letting everything rest in the air particles. He gave me the whole spiel on it, but a COVID break is an extended water break. Guys are all spaced. They go get their own jug of water, and then if they allow their bodies and, they're not on top of each other, they're not next to each other for 3 to 5 minutes, it improves their chance of not having something pass from one player to the next. So they've done a lot of research. They've done a lot of homework. It looks different, though. If you're just a bystander that walks up on practice, seeing the masks, seeing a huddle, and seeing the sidelines with the spacing, it's different. But when the game starts or when a scrimmage starts and you see it's 11 on 11 with the coach on the sideline, it looks kind of normal then.
Kevin Suits is with us, sports director at 1011, high school sports back underway. Were you surprised by the decision by the High School Activity Association to go forward? Not every state is. There's more that are than aren't. But did it surprise you? And how tough of a decision do you think it was for those folks?
It did not surprise me one bit, Greg, and here's why. If you look at the population of Nebraska and where it's spread out, you cannot take away the opportunity for some of these rural communities to play football this fall when they've had very few cases, if any at all. If they were to make a blanket statement to pull the plug on the whole thing, which that has happened in 17 states in the U.S., and that's the number right now, there have been a lot of states that have altered their schedule, which that means they're either playing after Labor Day, later in the season, or they've maybe moved it to the spring. I believe the number is 14. Nebraska is one of 14 states that's playing it as originally scheduled, most of them in the Great Plains region as well. So I wasn't surprised at the decision. And, we've been to some of these rural communities, and you don't get the sense that there's any fear because they've had such low experience with it. They're just not around it. But I do think it is a different discussion when you come into the Lincoln, Omaha, and some of the more metropolitan areas in the state of Nebraska, and that's where the NSAA kind of pushed it off to, well, we're going to let your district decide, and we're going to let the local officials make that decision. I don't think it's for the NSAA to make the call whether they should play football in, say, David City as opposed to Omaha.
Well, and you mentioned local districts' decisions, and OPS did decide not to go forward with fall sports, so they're out. I know you also converse with a lot of athletic directors. How big of a scramble was it to replace all those OPS teams on all the schedules, football, volleyball, softball, what it may be? How big of an undertaking was that?
You know, honestly, Greg, this surprised me. In my conversations, it was not as big of a scramble as you would have imagined. I thought initially it'd be like, oh, my goodness, Lincoln Southwest has to come up with 4 games on the fly. But these ADs, they communicate so frequently and they're in the same conferences and seminars a lot. So they have maintained pretty regular communication. And it was as simple as, not to oversimplify this, Greg, but okay, so this team lost an opponent, so did we. You get on the phone, and honestly, within 2 days, that game is pretty much agreed upon verbally. Now it's just up to getting it signed off on where you're going to play, what time it's going to be, and making sure that equipment-wise everything is okay. So I didn't get the impression that this thing was a big stretch and a huge, massive undertaking that it became a burden. It was more of a, I know this person, they know me, let's get on the phone. It's almost like, scheduling some of these youth baseball games. You lose a game on a rainout, you want your boys to play 2 nights later, you just call somebody up, and all of a sudden you've got a game in short time.
Yeah, love that. That's kind of old school way to get things done. Just go pick up the phone and make a call and get it done. It hasn't been all a bed of roses. I know you had a story tonight about an outbreak with the Lincoln East volleyball team. Milford, I know, has had problems with their football team. In fact, I think they had to cancel their opening game of the season. Do you anticipate, I guess they all have to anticipate some of this happening throughout the fall, don't they?
Absolutely. You don't know when it's going to come, and when it does come, if it's deemed an outbreak or there's high exposure, you just got to shut it down. And I think all the athletic directors, all the coaches, all the players, they understand this. So now it's all about what are you going to do in the event that happens. One, the team that has been exposed, they've got to go into quarantine. But then for the opponents that maybe lost somebody, the NSAA has set up a database so that the teams that have lost opponents or games, you can go in and you look at this database and you can try to line up a game in a short amount of time. So, I don't know if that's answering your question, Greg, but I think that these teams, they are prepared. There's a contingency plan in place if you're an opponent that just lost a team. And then if you are the team, knowing what the proper steps are. And, in fact, we're going to talk about Grand Island football coming up tonight at 10 o'clock on 10/11. Grand Island just got back to action a few days ago. They had to go into quarantine back on, I believe, August 9th. It was right as 2 days or fall camp preseason practice was about to start for them, but now they're back on the field. And they'll share with us a little bit about what they did in the meantime because they're still hoping to play here within the next 10 days.
But they won't play this Friday, right?
Correct. They're out this week, but they will play next week. They're keeping their fingers crossed.
How will all this affect playoffs and that type of thing? I mean, if you get a team that can only maybe get 6 games in, will they be judged differently than somebody that maybe gets closer to their complete schedule done?
Yes, and this is going to be a really interesting thing to watch as the season plays out. You might have an undefeated team go 6-0 and maybe grab the 1 seed. And I don't know if that's fair or not, but that's just going to be the way 2020 goes. The NSAA has said they are not – these rescheduled games that we were just talking about, they do not count toward wild card points. So some people may ask, well, why are you going to even play it then? Because what's the benefit from a wild card or a record standpoint? Well, let's give the boys a few more chances to get on the field and make some memories. And you never know. Maybe one of these, handshake games is going to provide the greatest highlight of the season or maybe the most dramatic finish. So you don't want to rob the kids of that opportunity if it exists. However, it will be judged differently in the eyes of the NSAA as they start to go through the seeding and decide who gets in the playoffs and also decide who gets the 1 seed, who's getting a home game. So that's going to be an interesting study. And I think if you talk to any coach, they're less concerned about what the playoff seeding is going to look like. They're more concerned about how many games are we going to get in. When we started doing our high school football previews, you got the sense from some coaches that they were just hanging on a thread. I think that now that we're this far into preseason practice in the season, week 1 starts tomorrow, you get the sense of now is like, how many games can we play? And they have a better feeling that week 9 is attainable. It was maybe seeming more of a far-fetched thing a few weeks ago.
No, I'm with you. I can sense that too, and I kind of feel that way with college football. I kind of sense that those 3 power conferences that are still pushing through have a better chance to make it now than I did a couple of weeks ago. I hope that's accurate because we all want it. Well, I'm jealous, Kevin. I mean, you guys are at least getting to go out, cover games, talk about games. We're sitting here, no Husker sports for the foreseeable future. I'm glad for the young people, boys and girls, are getting that opportunity to compete, particularly the ones that are seniors this year in high school, that they're at least getting a chance to compete.
I totally agree with you, Greg. And the one thing we haven't talked about that has been a constant theme in my interactions with coaches and players, more so coaches, is the mental health of these young men. Yeah. The fact that they are able to stay social with their teammates and with their friends, the fact that they can get some life lessons, which sports so often provides, and also just have a sense of normalcy. This is good. And having witnessed several practices already over the past few weeks, I can sense a little pep out of these guys. And quite frankly, it's been a rough 2020 for everybody, especially for some of these high schoolers who didn't get prom, who didn't get their spring sports season. There have been a lot of roadblocks that have been put in front of them, but having them out on the athletic field and around their buddies, you can sense that their hearts are warm right now and they're excited about what lies ahead.
Oh, I'm so happy for him. And, we've had good success around here. I mean, you did cover a lot of Legion ball over the summer. That seemed to go off without much of a hitch. I know the Southwest squad got shut down for a little while, and one of the East teams had to stop their season. But that happened. We had the Shrine Bowl that went off. I don't even think there was a hitch. I don't think there was a positive test that came out of that. At least I didn't hear of one. So at least we've been pretty fortunate in the state of Nebraska to get some things checked off the list here during this pandemic.
Absolutely. There's a lot of positive momentum, and I think Nebraska is setting a bit of a blueprint nationally for how this looks and how it can work. I know that everything needs to be looked at from a case-by-case standpoint because, like we mentioned about the population distribution in this state, but for how it can work, how it can be done, and the Shrine Bowl is a fantastic example because those boys, they didn't just show up and play a football game back in the middle of the summer. They were there for a week in advance, and they were going to meals together. They were going to meetings together. They were going through other various functions out in the community. They played a football game, and there were 0 cases, coaches, administrators, organizers, and players. So that was the first sign that it could be done. I think that was evaluated by the NSAA as they started to look at the football season this fall. And here we are. We're on the brink of week 1, and you get the sense that everything is trending in the right direction for those who want to see football this fall.
Oh, this is beautiful. Can't wait to watch the coverage in the coming weeks. Good luck to you and your staff. I know you're going to be busy. We appreciate you taking some time to talk to us tonight here, Kevin.
I appreciate it, Greg. Stay well, and thank you for the time.
There he is, Kevin Suit, Sports Director at 1011 Sports, joining us here on our Sports Nightly Hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. When we come back, the former host of this show, Jeff Colhane, will join us from Fargo, North Dakota. That's next. Welcome back, Sports Nightly here on a Wednesday night. Moving right along, delighted to welcome the former host of this little ditty. He's moved on to bigger and better things now. Jeff Colhane joins us from Fargo, North Dakota. He's the voice of the Bison. Good evening, sir. How are you doing?
How you doing, my friend? It has been a unique few hours here in the sports world, that's for sure. And 2020 doesn't want to go away. So I'm doing good. It's been weird the last few hours.
No, it's been weird really for the last 6 months. And let's start that before we get to what I brought you on, and that's to talk about the Bison scheduling a football game in October. But Jeff, I think I'm exhausted. I'm worn out. I'm worn out by the virus and canceling everything. the racial unrest, it grains on you to the point where you want to push away and not deal with it anymore. Do you feel that at all?
Yeah, it's really complicated. I think especially the social unrest aspect of it. The virus is pretty simple for me. I'm tired of it. I mean, that one goes without saying, And I think we got some encouraging news just a little while ago as well, with some improved, cheaper testing with quicker turnaround times. That just I saw came out on social media from a medical and a health expert. So I think that's positive news that we can take in. The social justice side has been frankly very sad for me. Dealing and talking about a lot of the same things that unfortunately we've talked about for a long, long time. And I think every story, every situation certainly it can be complicated. There are always many sides to every story, but the crux of it is you hate to see people die or get hurt in the situations that we are seeing right now. And a lot of our professional athletes are standing up and bringing attention to it. Certainly the NBA tonight has been at the forefront. The WNBA followed, and Major League Baseball with the Brewers and the Reds, and also the Mariners and Padres have echoed those sentiments. So, yeah, I think just for me, Greg, it's sad. I wish people would treat each other well and with respect. And racism in our country, sadly, is not going to go away tomorrow or anytime soon. But I wish it would go away sooner rather than later, because it's an awful, awful thing.
Do you think the NBA's done for the year? Because I get the feeling, and just listening to Doc Rivers' impassioned speech the other night and some of this other stuff, I could see these guys just saying, we're done. We're walking out of here. We're leaving this bubble. And I think that's part of it, Jeff. They're all down in this bubble. They can't live their kind of normal lives. They're cooped up. And I think social experiments may show that may not be the best way to do this. I know they were doing it to protect themselves and keep the virus away so they could play games. But what do you think? Is it over? Or do you think they come back and finish the playoffs?
Yeah, I think that they're about three. When this all came down about 3 hours ago, driving home from work, my initial thought was I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't continue on. Now, after hearing some of the things that others have said, I think I could see them. I could see the NBA players. They've tried to use this as a platform already. I could see them trying to go to even further heights to use their platform with the playoffs currently going on to provide more attention to the issues here and to the social justice stance that we've seen out of the bubble in Orlando. So, quite frankly, Greg, I wouldn't be surprised either way right now. And I think that's just where I'm at on it. There's a meeting tonight, I believe. It's actually taking place currently, I think,
now. Yeah.
In Orlando with the players. And I would not be surprised if they call it off. But I do think that even as much support as Adam Silver has given the players to
he's given them everything.
And he's given them everything.
Yeah.
I think at some point here as well, there certainly is a business component to what is going on. And there's a lot on the line from that respect, too, that affects the players and affects the owners and affects employees of teams around the NBA. So I honestly think my initial thought was I wouldn't be surprised, but I do believe what will happen is tomorrow we won't see teams play, but I think they'll come back by the weekend or early next week and start up again. That'd be my take on it.
All right, we'll see. Jeff Colhane's with us, former host of this show, now the voice of the Bison of North Dakota State. The Bison's season, like a lot around college football, certainly the Big Ten, has been pushed to the spring, and yet earlier this week, here came this announcement that the Bison are going to play an October game against Central Arkansas. Give me the background. What's the story behind this?
Yeah, so I think two main things are the reason why this took place. One, last week when the NCAA came out and provided college football programs with the answers to the eligibility question for those, well, really for everyone, quite frankly, where you're not going to lose a year if you play in the fall or in the spring. That provided some answers for the coaching staff, for Matt Entz and his program, and the director of athletics here at NDSU, Matt Larson, as well, about those, consistent questions that not only here but everywhere around the country, Nebraska, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, their players are asking the coaches, hey, what's the situation if we play 2 in the fall and it shuts down and then we don't get to play in the spring, or we play 3 in the spring? Am I losing a year? And so the opt-out question was big. When those answers came down the line, I think that certainly helped. And then the other aspect of this that did not sit well with Matt Entz here at North Dakota State was when the NCAA only allowed 12 hours of contact during the week with coaches and players if they're not playing any games. And you couldn't do 11-on-11. You couldn't do 7-on-7. I mean, essentially, you're not allowed to do really anything from a football development perspective. So when all those answers came down the line, it was made very clear for North Dakota State that they wanted to schedule at least one, if not more, if they could do it. They had some previous conversations with Central Arkansas just under 2 weeks ago, and were really close to lining up a game. In fact, I think they had really solidified a date and were ready to play until some communication kind of fell through and some other questions popped up with how the season could look. So the big one from Matt Entz's perspective, Greg, was being able to get the full 20 hours of practice a week to essentially have another fall camp, get some more practice time in, and then at the end of it have a little bit of a cherry on top with a football game at the end of the 30 days or so, and to kind of go out in style into the off season.
I think it's great. And I know the Big Ten coaches aren't happy with this 12-hour limit, too, while they're sitting around and watching the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 go full bore and get games in and do all that stuff, and they're handicapped, they feel like, by the 12 hours. They'd love to be able to do that. Nebraska would love to be able to kind of have a fall-spring game if they could pull that off, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm envious of what you can do. So, all right, so you have that game, and then I guess kind of shut her down for a while and then get geared up. Is there any kind of schedule put out by the Missouri Valley for next spring yet, or when would you anticipate something like that?
Yeah, sadly, we don't have any answers on that either, and you wish you would by now, but I think that's a little bit of a sample size of how this has all been handled at the higher-ups. And I'm talking about the NCAA, some of the conference commissioners, obviously, and how it's been just not discussed probably as much as it should have. So, no, there is no plan right now. I see the Big Ten is starting to get a little bit proactive about playing earlier in January and February and maybe doing it at dome stadiums or indoor venues, and that's interesting to follow. But I'll tell you what, it's a big question, Greg, the viability of a spring football season. If you go March through May and possibly play 10 or 11 games and then trying to restart another season in the fall of 21, it gets tough. I mean, It's a physical sport. I know these kids are young and can handle a lot from that perspective, but it's not basketball. It's not baseball.
Right.
You're playing a big-time contact sport. And so can you turn around from the end of May to the start of September or even the start of October and take away some of the injuries that you think you'll have on the back end? It is a huge question that everybody that's been pushed to the spring has, especially at this level.
Yeah. Crazy times, and we still don't know. You mentioned the new the new testing device, which I think is going to really help out sports. I think it's really going to make a difference for the NFL. That's really, I think, going to solidify. They'll be able to get their season in, and you hope that there's a vaccine around the corner so we can all kind of get back to knowing what's on the line. How's your summer been? Have you fixed that big banana hook of yours, or what's it been like?
The legend grows, my friend. You've seen it. You've seen it in its prime. It has not gotten a whole lot better. Just, as a bad golfer, you just kind of get used to trying to place your bad shots, right? So that's kind of where I'm at. Love to golf, love to play and get out and be around friends. And up here, we only get about 3 months of sunshine. So
come on.
That. So no, it's been great, and have a little bit more time before the snow hits here, so I'm sure we'll get out there and do it again here pretty quick.
You got at least 3 more weeks before the snow gets there.
Well, yeah, about 10 days, I think, is what we're looking at. Probably about 10 days. Yeah.
All right, my friend. Appreciate it. I'm glad to hear you got a game to call in October, and we'll be in touch.
That sounds good. Always good talking to you, Sharpie.
There he is, Jeff Colhane, with us here on our Sports Hotline Hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. All right, Ben will join me next. We'll open up the phone lines, whatever you'd like to talk about, 531-500-4686, the number if you want to be a part of the program, either with a call or a text. That also works on our U.S. Cellular text line. U.S. Cellular, the official wireless provider of Husker Athletics. Back with more next. 531-500-4686. That's the number if you want to be a part of the program tonight. Thanks to Jeff Colhane and Kevin Suits, both terrific guests here on the program. And you can just hear the lift in Kevin Suits' voice, Ben. And I told him, I go, hey, I'm jealous. I mean, you're getting to cover sports. You're getting to go out and watch athletes compete and see the glimmer in their eye because they're out there competing, whether it's on a football field or a softball diamond or whatever. And I go, here we are, no Husker sports for the foreseeable future. I go, I'm jealous, man. You got it going over there. And good for them and good for the kids that are able to compete right now.
Yeah, I was driving to the grocery store the other day and even saw, a baseball game happening over at Millard West, and it's just that's great that there is sports happening. Man, it makes me really jealous that there's no Husker sports happening. Yeah, don't even know when the next time a Husker team will take the field or the court or whatever. Hopefully sometime here soon.
We will have a recruiting announcement coming up in about an hour. Thomas Fedoni, the outstanding tight end from the Council Bluffs side of the Omaha Metro, is going to, on a live TV station up in Omaha, KETV, they're doing a football special tonight. He's going to make his pick live on TV. I think it's supposed to be right around 8:40. This is a guy wanted by a lot of people. We talked to Mitch Sherman the other night, who was at one of their practices earlier this week. He had a chance to talk to him and interview him. He's one of, if not the most highly sought-after tight end in the country. This would be a huge, huge get if he picks that NU hat here in about an hour.
Yeah, I think this is one of the more coveted recruits in a while that have come through the area. And, yeah, this one would hurt if he decides to pick a different hat. Saw the 4 hats he put on the table, Iowa, Michigan, LSU, and Nebraska. If he picks a different one up, it's not going to be a fun feeling tonight. So, yeah, let's hope he picks the Big Red.
Again, that'll be about 8:40. We'll know the decision before we leave the air tonight about where he is headed to play his college football in a year. We were supposed to have Lane Grindle with us tonight, our Major League Baseball insider. He has certainly had his hands full today with the news of the afternoon when the Brewers canceling their games. It was a home game for the Brewers in Milwaukee. They are right at just north of the city where the shooting took place earlier in the week with Jacob Blake. So Lane gives his apologies, but he's busy doing other things for the Brewers tonight and couldn't come on with us. So they're kind of ground zero with this thing. And the Brewers and Reds postponed their game. The Mariners also announced a little bit ago that they were postponing their game. The rest of Major League Baseball is playing. The NHL playoffs is continuing, but the NBA and the WNBA postponed their action for today. There were 3 NBA playoff games that were supposed to have been played today, including with the Milwaukee Bucks, who were the first one who And that was a really odd situation. They were supposed to play Game 5 against Orlando. The Magic were out warming up, and then the Bucks just didn't come out of their locker room, and then got word to Orlando they weren't going to play, and Orlando opted to join them and not force a forfeit and say we join the cause. And then the other two games of the night said we're going to jump on board with this as well. There is a meeting currently going on in the bubble with any player that wanted to be a part of this to talk about where they want to go from here. And I point blank asked Jeff Colhane in our last segment, do you think that this is over? They're done. And he said, well, when he first heard this afternoon, he thought that might be the case. He thinks that they may just put a little pause in for a couple of days. You know, they'll do what they want to do. I guess one of my questions is, will people miss it? I don't know. I mean, the ratings haven't been very good. If you get college football cranked up here in a week or two, you're going to have the NFL going in a couple of weeks. I don't know how many people would miss the NBA, Ben. I know we're not a hotbed here in Nebraska with NBA fans. We have some on our staff that love the NBA. I just don't know how much people will miss it. And here's my fear for sports is when everything got shut down for 4 or 5 months, I think people found that they could have a life outside of sports. And if you just rip this away from them again, I mean, this could be damage down the road for the NBA.
Yeah, based on my Twitter feed when Luka Doncic hit that shot, I think there are maybe more NBA playoff fans than maybe I had originally thought. I can only speak for me. I can't speak for anybody else, but, you know, the NBA is certainly I think the amount of casual fans of the NBA are kind of going away. I think it's a deal where you either really like it or you don't pay attention at all. I think that you do have a fair amount of, playoff, I don't want to call them bandwagoners, but playoff guys that get into it in the playoffs and that's it. But
that's me.
Yeah, and I think you do have a handful of those people as well. But and it's hard to say in Nebraska, as you said. Nebraska is one of those states that just doesn't have, even a team in Kansas City or a local-ish team. I suppose the Denver Nuggets are the closest we get to that, but. The ratings haven't been good. I don't know if that's because, they're having to play games in the morning and the afternoon, but, I don't really know. I don't know enough about it to form an opinion one way or the other, but I would miss it to an extent, but I can't say I've watched a ton of it to this point.
Yeah, and again, with NFL on the horizon, I mean, we're going to get into that big time. That certainly plays. And if you get some college football games going, that's certainly going to grab some headlines. I don't know. I mean, NBA needs to consider that. If they want to pull the plug, they need to consider about long-term ramifications. And there's a reason why it's not overly popular in the state. You mentioned we don't have a franchise all that close. Denver and Minneapolis would be the two closest ones we have. There's not. I mean, we do have Isaiah Roby that now has cracked the league. At least he's on the kind of the taxi squad of the Thunder. So he's kind of hanging around. But before that, you had a drought from Mikey Moore to Isaiah. So you haven't had a lot of Huskers that have made it in the NBA to really grab you a hook there. And I think people in this state, college sports is A number one. And why not? With the Huskers being such a big brand as they are nationally and regionally, you have the College World Series, which is a big play in Omaha every year. So this is just kind of more of a college part of the country. And so, yeah, I just, and I'm sure that Adam Silver's got to be worried about what this, if they were to pull the plug, that's going to be a big damage to the brand of the NBA. I'm sure he's nervous about all this and probably anxious for this meeting to end as he can hear what the thoughts of the players are after that. 531-500-4686, the number if you want to dot us up with a comment or question. We're back to wrap up the hour next. 531-500-4686, the number if you want to dial us up with a comment or question. Some fun in Major League Baseball last night as Lucas Giolito threw the first no-hitter of the season. That kid's got some stuff, Ben. I think he's got potential ace written all over him for the next decade plus. I like his stuff.
I think it was it 2 seasons ago that for all qualifying pitchers, he had the worst ERA of all starters. It was like 6.21 or something like that. You really saw him kind of take some steps. Take some steps last year. Still a little bit of inconsistency, but you saw him start to really dominate some starts. And, obviously that continued last night. It was a great matchup for him. The Pirates are absolutely putrid offensively. Even some of their more consistent bats, think of Kevin Newman, Brian Reynolds, Gregory Polanco, under 200, under 210. So great matchup
Dyson.
for him. Yeah. I think he's south of 170 on the year. But, he was unbelievable last night. And I watched from probably the 6th inning on of that game. And following some of the post game, you heard the White Sox broadcast crew was giving tons of credit to James McCann, the catcher for the White Sox. And Lucas Giolito said in the post game that he only shook McCann once. You want to talk about a catcher that's calling a game. He had everything working last night, the changeup, the slider, obviously the fastball too. Josh's Twins got after Giolito in the season opener. I think Kepler hit 2 bombs off him. But ever since that start, I think he had 13 Ks last night and 13 Ks in a start before that, and both were career highs. So, I would say he's off to a pretty decent start.
Yeah, and we'll have Teddy on tomorrow night. I asked Teddy way back in July, right before the season began. I said, okay, which Chicago team's going to have a better year? And he said the White Sox, and the Cubs got off to the really good start. The White Sox are reeling them in. I think they're pretty close to the same record now. And that White Sox team is on the move. They're on the rise. They're kind of hitting their window where I think they're going to be really good for a while. And I think their battle with the Twins and even the Indians are hanging in there. That's going to make a pretty interesting September in the Central between those 3 teams. I still lean the Twins just for overall part of the team. I think they have a better rounded team, but it's going to be fun, I think, the next month in that division.
Yeah, they got Tim Anderson back, which was huge. And then, you think about some of the other parts that that are starting to come together. Offensively, they're good. Dallas Keuchel has come out of nowhere and has had a really good year for them on the mound. But yeah, it's been a good year for the White Sox. Their offense can really score. They can hit. And, I hate to say it being a Royals fan, but they're kind of a fun team to watch. They got a lot of young stars with Moncada, with Robert, with Jimenez, who got hurt last night in the dog pile. But yeah, they're a fun team to watch. They're pretty good, no doubt.
Yeah. All right. Thanks to Kevin Suits, Jeff Cohen for being a part of this hour. Next hour, buy, sell. We're going to get the boys involved. This is going to be fun. Come on back for that.